Hello, I'm Alexia, a volunteer at Voices of Wentworth, a non-partisan community organisation set up to listen, inform and advocate on behalf of our electorate. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this beautiful land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Today, I have the pleasure of chatting to Wendy Power, a volunteer at Grandmothers for Refugees. Hi, Wendy.
Hello, Alexi. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Firstly, I'd like to ask you, what does Grandmothers for Refugees do and how was it started?
Okay, well, we call ourselves Grandmothers for Refugees New South Wales, and we've been active for over 6 years, out and about. It was actually started by a group of grandmothers who worked in early education in Victoria, perhaps 12 to 18 months prior. And they called together what they thought would be kitchen table meeting. And I think something like 100 people turned up. So they thought, wow, there's interest. One of our leading grandmothers, Gabby, who lives in Barara, heard about the Victorian grandmothers, and by this time it was 2015, and contacted them and said, is there one in New South Wales? I'd like to join. And they said, no, but why don't you start one? So she did. And we've learned along the way. I became involved early, probably about 3 or 4 months later, simply by talking to someone in a Wentworth coffee shop, another woman of a similar age. We got chatting. She'd just joined and I haven't stopped since. In Sydney, or in New South Wales, we have perhaps around 400 members and quite a number of supporters as well who aren't grandmothers. And I think we've got coverage at the moment in pretty much every federal electorate, but the bulk of our grandmother members are within the Greater Sydney area.
What is it that attracted you to Grandmothers for Refugees when you were sitting in that cafe and listening to the story? What was it that really just sparked that and said, this is where I'm going to put some of my energy and my time?
Yeah, well, I've been involved and had a great interest in refugee matters for many decades now. And that came about in the late 70s. I moved with my family to live in Jakarta, small children at that time. And it was the time, if those of us old enough to recall, that unexpectedly Indo-Chinese boat people started leaving Vietnam in particular and moving towards Southeast Asia. I think there was one small boat that actually landed in Darwin. And so in Jakarta at that point in time, I think there was one UNHCR representative, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee. So he just scrambled to quickly get some sort of infrastructure up and put out a call for anyone who had some time and was an interest and prepared to volunteer, which I did. At that point in time, it wasn't possible to get a work permit as an accompanying spouse, which I was then in Indonesia. So I got very involved pre-computer days or early days of computers. We were going through boat lists, trying to match up family members who'd ended up in different places. I was going out, there was a holding camp about an hour or so from Jakarta, and I was going out there with some others to do some English language teaching to children. And I was also doing a little bit of work for the Australian Embassy there, taking out drugs to some of the refugees who'd been accepted by Australia, but didn't have an acceptable TB X-ray, TB being a major concern at that point in time. So just putting my hand to whatever was needed to be done at that point in time.
So you had an experience that was on the ground. I feel like one of the issues with refugees in Australia is that we live in such a privileged country. And for many of us don't really know what it's like to, fortunately, to have to flee the place we love. Sometimes there's a misconception about refugees wanting to just move to a different place for a better life. And really, that's not the case. These people are actually fleeing for their lives.
Indeed.
Not just for a better life. And
yes, well, we very much see our role as advocating, but also providing public education, because as we all know, there's been a lot of spin, particularly over the last 20 years, which Doesn't seem such a long period for those of us in our 70s, but clearly is a long period. So much spin. So trying to cut through some of that, to put a face to the faceless, to talk about people such as the Biloela family. But also, I mean, one of our leading orthopedic surgeons now, known internationally, Dr. Actually, I've got it here, Munjad Al-Mudiris, was at one point in time on a boat on Christmas Island referred to as a number.
Oh gosh, and I'm sure your assistance is greatly appreciated. Very important.
Well, thank you. But certainly a number of individual grandmothers do, apart from being involved in grandmothers, do a lot of hands-on work. And we work closely with Mums for Refugees, wonderful Australia-wide group, and they do an awful lot of hands-on work. Many other groups. So as an organisation, we're into advocacy, public education, trying to cut through some of the myths with factual information. But individually, many of us, yes, involved on a face-to-face level.
The website has some wonderful resources, which we will most definitely add on afterwards. You contribute to that, or you run it?
I and one other grandmother, Helen, yes. And she does the resources section, which really is terrific. I was just looking again this morning.
Fantastic. Yeah. So why do you think that these type of grassroots organisations like Grandmothers for Refugees are important?
Look, I think people are wanting a voice. I think increasingly Australians, or many Australians, are feeling that we're just being fed spin, that our parliamentarians aren't accessible. On an individual level, the ones we know who represent us perhaps are good-hearted people who very much want to change, but within the party structure, it's very difficult. So, for example, someone might be talking about compassion for refugees, for climate change, for an integrity commission, but you have to look at the voting record, voting on our behalf. And it doesn't inspire us.
Yourselves very visible with your purple t-shirts, and I know you've been to Canberra and demonstrated there as well. And
so yes, always very visible, and grandmothers generally pretty accessible.
They've got the will to make things happen, and I think it's to a point in your life where you have more time to put some oomph behind the things you care for, and less afraid of speaking up as well.
Indeed, nothing to lose.
There's nothing to lose now. And I'm sure you've made some really dear friends through what you do.
Oh, I have indeed. And grandmothers from really disparate backgrounds. Everyone's got a backstory. And, in your 70s, you've got quite a lot of backstory.
I hope you do. I have no doubt you do.
I was going to say one of our feistiest and most active grandmothers is well into her 80s. And in terms of energy levels, we sit back and watch her in awe. So
fabulous. Yeah. That's great. And that's inspirational for us all as well, to have a vital life. We are a part of the community. We continue to contribute and participate. And that's really important for us personally, but as a whole, as a bigger group as well. So well done.
Thank you. Well, it's much healthier than yelling at the television.
Absolutely. That really doesn't get you anywhere.
It doesn't.
So as Wentworth locals, what are the 3 things that you suggest, or that you think that we could do to be more supportive of Grandmothers for Refugees, of course, and for our local community groups?
If you see us out and about, which hopefully will be very soon, it's been a great hardship to not be out and about, although we've sort of moved online with virtual vigils, but give us a wave if you're driving by, honk and a thumbs up if that's what you do. Come and have a chat if you've got the time. Many people, particularly younger people, love having a photograph taken with us. They think we're so cute. And
little do they know, there's bits behind the cuteness.
All except cute. And they share it on their social media, gets them talking, gets their friends talking about refugee matters. So another thing perhaps for Wentworth residents to do, and many are already doing it, many, is talk to your networks, your family, your friends, your neighbours, the people in your book group, in your tennis club, whatever. Just, particularly if you hear someone talking about illegals taking our jobs, etc., just get yourself a bit informed and just, quietly drop in that there's another story to all that.
Another side to the story.
Yeah, yeah.
What could our government, what could our leaders be doing to support Grandmothers for Refugees and the work you do?
Look, I think, and I was thinking both for grandmothers and community groups in general, is listen carefully, take people seriously. They're a proportion of your constituents. They vote, they influence other voters, and particularly grandmothers. We tend to be a bit at the top of the pyramid with our children, our grandchildren, our, neighbours, etc., the community elders. Listen to them carefully, take them seriously. Don't respond just with talking points and slogans, because life is much more complex than a slogan. And I'm thinking in particular of Stop the Boats. I mean, it's such a complex issue. There's been such learned research done on it and continues to be through, as on our website, the Keldor Centre for International Refugee Law, just down the road in Randwick at the University of New South Wales, many others. So there's proposed solutions, all sorts of ways.
Right.
Yeah. A plea to our elected representatives to not just be poll driven, but listen to your constituents, your voters. And there's a lot of informed, energetic young people coming up who are already voters or will be very soon.
Thank you so much for your time, Wendy. Most informative, most inspiring. We'll add links to the Grandmothers for Refugees website, of course, and also some of the references that you've mentioned, which are great resources for anybody that wants to dive a little bit deeper into this issue. Thank you to our Wentworth listeners, and we hope they might go to the Voices at Wentworth website as well, fill out our survey for us to understand what the concerns are in our electorate and have a stronger voice as a community. Thank you to Wendy. Thank you to the wonderful people in Wentworth that are doing such good work. It's a joy to celebrate everyone involved. Thanks again, Wendy.
Thank you, Alexia.
Soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.